Hey, welcome back. Today I'll be responding to a request I received on a video that I made about a year ago, where I showed how to make a Pokeball in Autocad. And the request was for me to show how to create the same Pokeball in Blender. So here we go. First off, I want to change my units. So I'll go to Scene Properties, Units, and I'll set the unit system to Imperial. And I'm going to be making a really small object, so I'll set the length to inches. But if you like working in metric units, you obviously don't need to do this. It's up to you. Next, I'll add a reference image. And I want this image to load facing front, so I'll hit the number 1 key on the number pad to switch to front view. Then I'll hit Shift A and go to Image and choose Reference. Then I'll select the image I want and click here to add the image. And now I'll hit Shift A to add a sphere. But I would advise against using a standard UV sphere because UV spheres have these poles that cause problems with topology because of all these edges converging at a single point. And you end up with this pinched starburst effect when you add a subdivision surface modifier. And even when you shade smooth, it's still there and it looks ugly. So I always use this round cube for most things, but if you don't see this option in your menu, come up here to the Edit menu and go to Preferences, Add-ons, and type Extra in the search box. And you want to enable the Extra Mesh objects. Then save Preferences and close the window. So I'll hit Shift A and add the round cube, and I want this to be a 1.5-inch radius. But for some reason, even though I have my units set to imperial and inches, this radius setting is still using meters as its unit of measurement. So in order for this sphere to have a 1.5-inch radius, I have to set this to 0.04. And if I switch to wireframe, you can see the topology. So I want to bump this up to get more density in the mesh. So I'll change this arc setting to 20. And now you can see my reference image is way too big, so I'll just scale it down until it's roughly the same size as the sphere in the image. And the image isn't exactly on center, so I'll move it over and down just a little bit. And that looks about right. It doesn't have to be perfectly aligned, so that's good enough. So now I want to straighten out this edge here, and also this edge here. So I'll select the sphere, switch to Edit Mode and Edge Selection. Then I'll double click on this edge to select it. Then I'll hit S for Scale, Z for the Z axis, and then I'll hit 0 and then Enter, and that will straighten the edge. And now we'll do the same thing for this other edge. Double click to select it, hit S, Z, 0, Enter. And now I want to create this channel that goes around the sphere. So I'll switch to Face Selection, and I'll click and drag to window select these two rows between the upper and lower shells. Then I'll hit Alt-E and choose Extrude Faces along Normals. And now I can simply drag my mouse to extrude the faces out or in, depending on which way I move my mouse. And they will extrude along their normal direction. So I'll drag them in until they line up with the image, something like that, and then click to accept it. And now if I switch to solid display and pan around, you can see how it's looking. And I guess I should move the reference plane back, so let me switch to object mode and move it back so it's out of the way. And now you can see how that extrude function worked. So now I need to cut out this circular area and create a flat spot. So with nothing selected, I'll hit Shift A and add a cylinder. I'll set the vertices to 64, the radius to 0.625, and I'll set the depth to 1. Then I'll rotate it 90 degrees. And if I hold down the Control key while doing this and watch up here in the upper left corner, I can rotate in 5-degree increments and I can see when I get to 90. So now I'll move it forward, and I want to move it until this edge is sitting just above the sphere, so I can see just a little bit of the flat on the bottom. I don't want it sitting inside the sphere because when I add the Boolean modifier, there will be an undercut. And I also don't want it sitting too far out away from the sphere because then I'll get this issue happening here. So I want to see just a little sliver of the flat. Something like that. And now I can select the sphere, go to the modifiers panel, and add a Boolean modifier. And right here where it says object, I'll click on this eyedropper and then select the cylinder and make sure I'm set to difference, and then I'll apply the modifier. And now I can delete the cylinder and you see I now have a flat spot here. But if I select the sphere and switch to edit mode and vertex selection, you see the problem with Booleans. They always leave a big mess to clean up with all these stray vertices and edges that aren't connected to anything. So this is how I typically clean up a mesh. Since this object is symmetrical, I only have to work on one quadrant. So I'll use the knife tool to cut an edge down the center from here to here. And then again from here to here. Then I'll hit 1 on the number pad to switch to front view. And I'll switch to wireframe, edit mode, and face selection. And I'll select and delete this half. Then I'll select and delete this half. So now I've eliminated a lot of extra work. So I'll switch back to solid display and start by fixing the easy stuff first and then move on to the more challenging stuff. So I'll switch to vertex selection and zoom in. And right here, I have these extra vertices that need to go away. But I can't just select them, right click and delete them because it deletes everything. And I can't right click and dissolve them because then I get this issue. So the best thing to do is merge them with a vertex you want to keep. But it's important to select them in the correct order because I want this stray vertex to merge with this vertex that I want to keep, not the other way around. So I'll select this stray vertex first, then I'll hold down the Shift key and select this vertex that I want to keep. And now with both of them selected, I'll right click and choose Merge Vertices at Last, which means the first vertex I selected will merge with the last one I selected. And now I can do the same thing with these others. And it looks like I have a polygon here that didn't get deleted, so I'll switch to Face Selection, select it, then right click and delete faces. And then I'll go ahead and merge a couple more of these stray verts. And if you run into this clipping issue where you can't zoom in close enough, just come over here to the side panel, go to the View tab, and change the focal length setting. I'll change it to 100 for now, but if it keeps happening, you can increase it more. So now I'll hit the N key to close the side panel, and I have these edges to deal with. So I think I'll grab the Loop Cut tool, and I'll cut in a new edge here. And if you click and drag, you can position the new edge right where you want it. Then let go of your mouse button to set the edge. And I'll put another edge here. Then I can use the knife tool to cut from this vert to this one, and again up here. But I think this edge is going to be a problem, so I'll double click to select it, right click and dissolve edges. Wait, let me undo that. I need to cut in an edge here first with the knife tool. And now I can double click this edge, right click and dissolve edges. So that was the easy stuff. The rest of the cleanup will be a little more challenging, but it's just more of the same, cutting in new edges, merging vertices, and dissolving edges. And that was a mistake, so undo, right click, and dissolve edges, not delete. So that's looking better, but I have these edges that are too close together, so I'm going to merge these vertices at last, and I'll do the same for these. And I'll do the same for these. But for these, I want to merge them at center. So that will move both vertices an equal amount to a point that's directly between them. Okay, I think that fixed most of the issues. The only thing that might be a problem are these two triangles, but I think it might be okay, so I'll leave it for now and fix it later if I need to. So now with everything adjusted, I'll switch to Object Mode, come over to the Modifiers panel, and I'll add a Mirror modifier. And I want it to go across the X-axis and the Z-axis. And that looks good, so I'll apply the modifier. And now I'll switch back to Edit Mode, Face Selection, and I'll select these faces, and I want to inset them just a little bit to create a support edge for smoothing. Then I'll inset again and scale it in some more. But it looks like I have a problem here, so let's undo that and see what's going on. So I'll window select this vertex, right click, and there's no merge option. So what if I click on the vertex and try to move it? Yeah, I have overlapping vertices. So I'll go ahead and merge this one with this one, and I'll do the same over here. And let's try insetting these faces again. Nope, there's still a problem, so let's check this again. Yeah, looks like there are more overlapping vertices, but how many? I click on this one again and move it. Yeah, there's another one. So I'll merge this one with this one, and this one with this one. And I'll do the same thing over here. And that should be okay now. So let's try insetting these faces one more time. Okay, it seems to be working now. So I'll inset in a little bit to create a support edge. Then I'll inset again and scale it in a little more. And then I'll inset one more time and scale it in a little further. So yeah, just one of the fun surprises you always get with Booleans. Anyway, before I go any further, I think I should assign some materials. So I'll come over here to the Material Properties panel and create a new material, and I'll call it black. Then I'll hit this plus button to add another material slot, and I'll click the new button, and I'll call this one red, and I'll set the base color to red. And I need to go back to the black material because I forgot to set the color to black. Okay, and now I'll hit the plus button one more time to add another material slot, and then I'll click the new button, and I'll call this one white, and I'll set the base color to white. And if I switch to material preview mode, you can see that the black material is applied to the entire model. So I'll select these 4 faces here, and then hold down the Control key and hit the plus key on the number pad 3 times to expand the selection. Then I'll hit number 1 on the number pad to switch to front view and switch to wireframe. Then I'll hold down the Shift key to select all the faces inside the channel. And now I can hit Control I to invert the selection. And over here in the material panel, I'll select the red material and assign it to the selected polygons. Then I'll hold down the Alt key and click and drag. No, that was wrong. Let me switch back to front view and try that again. And I'll hold down the Control key and click and drag to window select the top shell, which will deselect it. And now I can select the white material and assign it to this bottom shell. And now if I switch to material preview, you see the colors are all applied. So now I'll switch back to solid display, and I'll use the loop cut tool to add some support edges to help maintain the shape when I add the subdivision surface modifier. And like I did before, I'll hover over an edge until I see the edge loop appear. Then I can click and drag to slide the edge over to one side or the other. So I'll just add some edge loops everywhere there's a sharp corner. And the edge loop tool will work as long as you have quad topology. Once the edge loop runs into a triangle or an n-gon, it'll stop or shoot off in a different direction, like it's doing here. So I'll have to cut this edge in manually with the knife tool. And now that I have the edge loop in place, I'll need to go through and merge these vertices at center. And now we'll switch to object mode, right click and shade smooth. And then I'll come over here to the modifiers panel and I'll add a subdivision surface modifier. And I'll set the viewport level to 2. And I think that's looking pretty good, but the real test comes when you add a reflective material. So I'll come up here and click this down arrow to open the viewport shading menu. Then I'll switch to matte cap. And I'll select one of these reflective matte caps, like this gold one. You might not have some of these though. Some of them are ones that I made, and some of them I found online. There are lots of free matte caps available. If you just do a search for free Blender matte caps, you should be able to find lots of them. So I'll apply this gold matte cap and take a look at the model. And it's looking nice and smooth all over, except here in the middle where it's pinching, so that's a problem. But let's see what happens if I just dissolve these edges. And I think that's going to solve the problem, so I'll dissolve these up here. And I'll dissolve these over here. And I think that's looking really good. So I'll switch back to studio lighting and I'll disable the subdivision surface modifier for now. So now I just need to create this ring and the button. But This isn't looking right over here where I dissolve these edges, so I'm going to switch to edit mode and use the knife tool to extend these edges out to this loop. And I'll do the same thing over here. And I think that's looking a lot better. So now I'll switch to wireframe display and click over here to deselect the sphere. And now I'll hit Shift A and add a curve circle. And I already know that I need the radius to be at 0.27. So I'll do that. But that's not looking right. It's supposed to be just a circle without any internal geometry. So let me delete that and try it again. No, that's not right. Shift A, circle. I don't remember which one I used. Was it this one? No. Delete. Wait a minute. Let me delete this. And now with nothing selected, Shift A, curve, I'm going to add a Bezier circle. The radius of 0.27. Okay, that's right. And sometimes these different options can get really confusing. Okay, so now I'll rotate it up 90 degrees and move it up here in front. Then I'll come over to the Object Data Properties in the Geometry section, and I'll set the extrude amount to 0.03. And then I'll right-click and convert to Mesh. And now I'll add a Solidify modifier. But you see the offset is going in the negative direction, so it's solidifying in the wrong direction. So I'll change this to a positive 1, and I'll set the thickness to 0.15. And now I'll switch to solid display mode. And you see we have some shading issues, but that's a simple fix. Just right-click and choose Shade Auto Smooth. And that looks better. So I'll apply the Solidify modifier. Then I'll come around here to the back side, switch to Edit mode, double-click on one of these faces to select all the faces, and then hit X and delete them since they're not necessary. And now I'll switch back to Object mode and move the ring back into position. And with the ring selected, I'll shift select the sphere and then right-click and join. And that will add the ring to the sphere. But now the shading error is back, so to fix that, I need to add some support edges. So I'll switch to Edit mode and double-click to select this edge, and then hold down the Shift key and double-click to select this edge. And then I'll use the Bevel tool, and I'll set the width to 0.009 and the segments to 3. And if I enable the Subdivision Surface modifier and switch to Object mode, you see that everything is holding its shape and looking good. So one last thing I need to do for the ring is to assign a material. So I'll switch to Edit mode, Face Selection, and then double-click this face to select all the top faces, and then hold down the Control key and hit the plus key on the number pad a few times to select all the faces. Then go to Material Properties, select the white material, and click Assign. And while I'm here, I'll set the roughness to about 0.09 to make it shiny and reflective. And I'll do the same for the red material. And now if I switch to Object mode and Material Preview, see the reflections in the red shell. So now all I have to do is create the button. So I'll switch to wireframe mode, click over here to deselect the sphere, then I'll hit Shift A and add a cylinder. And I want it to be slightly smaller than the internal radius of the ring. So I'll set the radius to 0.26. And I'll set the depth to 0.2. And I'll leave the vertices set to 64. And now I'll rotate it 90 degrees and move it out in front. And then I'll switch to solid display, edit mode, face selection, and I'll delete this back face. Then I'll switch back to object mode and move it back into position. Maybe about like that. And I think I went a little too small on the radius, so I'm going to scale it up a little bit. About like that. And now I'll switch to edit mode and inset this face. And then inset it again. Then I'll double click to select this edge, bevel it, and I'll set the width to 0.01 and the segments to 3. And now I'll switch to object mode, and with the button selected, I'll shift select the sphere and then right click and join. And then same as before, I'll switch to edit mode, select this face, hold down the control key and hit the plus key on the number pad a few times to select all the faces. Then I'll go to the material panel, select the white material, and click assign. And I'll switch to object mode, material preview, and there you go. But if you want to take this a step further, you could create a procedural material for this grainy textured effect that you see here in the reference image. And to do that, I'll switch to the shading tab. And down here in the node editor, I'll hit Shift A and add a Voronoi texture. Then with it selected, I'll hit Shift D and create a duplicate. And I'll leave the settings in this first one alone, but in this second one, I'll change this F1 to smooth F1, and I'll plug the position output into the vector input on the first one. Then I'll hit Shift A and add a noise texture, and a mapping node, and a texture coordinate node. I'll plug the texture coordinate object output into the vector input on the mapping node, and I'll plug the vector output into the vector input on the noise texture. And now I need to mix the noise with the coordinate and mapping nodes, so I'll hit Shift A and add a mix node. I'll plug the noise texture into input A, and I'll plug the mapping node into input B. And then I'll plug the mix node into the vector input on the Voronoi texture. And I'm going to temporarily plug this first Voronoi texture into the surface input on the material output node, so I can see what it's doing. And it's not doing anything, so I'll hit Shift A and add a math node. And I'll change it from add to power, and I'll plug the value into the scale input on both Voronoi textures. And I'll set the base value to 15 and the exponent to 1.7. And now I see why it isn't doing anything. I'm working on the white material instead of the black material. It's been a long tutorial. Okay, so let me select all of this and hit Control X, and I'll switch to the black material and hit Control V. But of course that's not going to work. And now my white texture is black. So let me see why that's happening. I come over here. Yeah, something's wrong. What if I delete this and make a new material? No, that's making things worse. And now it's even more worse. So let's hit Control Z and undo a couple times. And now I see what's wrong. The material is unplugged. Okay, now the white material is back. So now I just need to switch back to the black material and redo everything I did before. But I'll just speed this up so I don't have to go through that whole explanation again. Okay, now I'm back to where I was before. So over here on the mapping node, I'll set the X, Y, and Z scale factors to 50. And on the noise texture, I'll set the scale to 10. So I'll leave the roughness alone, and I'll change the detail to 16. And on the mix node, I'll change from float to color. And now everything is unplugged, so I'll plug the noise back into input A and the mapping back into input B, and I'll plug the mix result into the Voronoi. And now it's starting to look like something, but it's not quite right. So let me change the mix factor to 925. And that's looking pretty good. It's just too big, so I'll change the mapping scale to 60 for X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to unplug the Voronoi and plug the principled BSDF back into the material output. And I'll hit Shift A and add a bump node. And I'll plug the Voronoi distance output into the height input on the bump node. And I'll plug the normal output into the normal input on the principled BSDF. But now you see it's bumping inward instead of outward, so I'll enable this invert option. And that's looking better, but it's definitely way too big. So I'll change the mapping scale to 90. And the bump strength is too much. So I'll set the strength to 0.2 and the distance to 0.4. And that's looking a lot better, but it's still too big. So I'll set the mapping scale to 150. Or how about 200? Still too big. How about 250? Okay, I think that's looking pretty close to the reference image, so I'm going to call it good enough. And that's going to do it for this one. I hope it was helpful. I definitely had some problems along the way, but in the end, it all worked out. So anyway, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and post them below. And if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.